Good morning, and the more than 2 million job cuts certainly have hit individuals hard, but there's also a ripple effect on stock price, employee morale, and productivity. And how do executives go about deciding who gets to keep their job? Well, with insights this morning, I'm joined by Jon Winsett, a managing partner at the spend management consulting firm, NPI, and Mark Murphy, the chairman of the research and training company Leadership IQ, and Dan Schaefer of Schaefer Asset Management. He is the CEO. Good morning, gentlemen. Good to have you here. Jon, let me start with you. What are the major reasons why companies do decide to cut their workforce?
Well, they're trying to save money any way they can. And I tell you, at NPI, we advise our clients to exhaust every other method before they even get to contemplating job cuts. There's so many ways that companies can save money by just looking deep into some of their larger cost line items. Any areas that they spend in that are highly negotiated, like technology, transportation, telecom. It's so easy for companies to overspend in these areas. So we advise them to bring in external market experts to benchmark their pricing to make sure that they're not overspending. I mean, the last thing an executive wants to do is wake up the next morning after having to lay off 50 people and realize they could have saved maybe tens of millions of dollars in other areas. How
do they decide, Jon, who to cut? Because, on Wall Street, usually if you cut one top managing director, that could save, as many as 5 other jobs of either, associates or VPs or things of that nature. So how do they decide?
Well, we see our clients really focusing on the folks that are bringing in revenue, affecting the top line growth, a la salespeople. Those executives that are a big drain on the bottom line, they may not be so safe. I think the key here is, bring an objective eye and, make sure you cut the fat and not cut into the muscle. You got to keep those core value producers on staff.
Mark, what happens to the people who remain? I mean, are there concerns about whether or not their productivity increases or, in fact, decreases because morale is so low? How do they address that, corporations?
Typically, there's been this great myth in corporate America that once you do a layoff, that all the surviving employees are going to be so grateful that they still have a job that they're going to work twice as hard and productivity is going to go up. We find that the opposite's true. In fact, about 74% of employees say that their productivity decreases after the layoff. So they're not sitting around feeling grateful. They're sitting around feeling guilty, anxious, and angry. So the number one thing that organizations really have to focus on is, while we're doing outplacement and those sorts of things for employees that are leaving, and that's wonderful, we do need to especially focus on all the employees who stay. How do we keep them productive? So leaders need to get out, they need to be engaging, they need to be approachable, they need to be visible, they need to be candid, and it really requires high-level, highly skilled managers to keep their folks up, motivated, and focused once you've done a layoff.
And Dan, what we have seen, at least of late, is that companies are getting rewarded for announcing 5 or 10% job cuts. And in fact, if you kind of don't do it, it's almost you're looked upon negatively as to why your costs are so high in a difficult economy. Why is that?
Well, the stocks are looking for something to move up on, so they'll take any news. In this current environment, as stocks have been moving lower and all the trends have been moving lower, anytime you get a job cut, people think their company's going to be saving money, and that's looked at as a plus. In a good environment, under normal circumstances, if a stock price is moving up and they cut jobs, that's very positive. That means management is executing a plan. But right now, with this economy the way it is, and the companies trying to save themselves, that these stocks are going to get little pops, and then the regular trend will continue to move down after the initial news, because it still costs money to lay off employees, and shut stores. It's not cost-free. So there's still going to be a cost, but it's more of a long-term savings for the company as a strategic plan to keep the company alive in this particular environment.
What kind of costs are we talking about here? I mean, these are severance packages. I mean, what are we looking at?
Well, when you, for instance, Office Depot is closing stores. You got to pay people to move that merchandise out of the stores. You got to pay to clean up that facility. You've got to then have some of the severance packages for the employees. I don't know the exact details, but again, these are costs and they're charges. They're one-time charges, but they still touch the bottom line. It's going forward that they won't have the overhead of those facilities and employees for down the road earnings.
Mark, what about the morale impact of not being able to tell your employees when or if it's done, it's finished. You know, we're in the kind of economy right now where many executives don't know themselves. So they'll come out and they'll say, okay, we're going to lay off 5 or 10% of the workforce. We hope that this is finished, but we can't guarantee because we don't know where the economy is going. What do you do about that? Because then do you sit there thinking, oh my goodness, am I next?
Sure. One of the biggest things that kills productivity and kills morale is the sense that, is this really the end? You know, there's been an old adage in layoffs for a long time. You get one bite at the apple. If an employee is sitting around wondering every day, is this it? Is there another one? Is it my turn now? And one of the big things that leaders mess up on is that they don't share what they can share. So they do two things. One, they don't share what they can, and two, they withdraw into their office. When the leader says, listen, I honestly don't know. We think that this is where we're at. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm going to be available to you. I'm going to share with you every time I have some new information. I'm going to be there. I'm going to let you know about it. Too many leaders retreat back into their office, and then employees are left to wonder. And when they wonder in an environment like this, they are going to suspect the worst.
And Dan, you look at a company like Citigroup, for example, it has sort of been negatively impacted by the fact that the perception was they were not laying people off as aggressively as they should have, right?
Right. They should have been cutting fat a long time ago. We talked about that several times, that the strategic plan there was that they just had too much overhead, just too many employees to operate that business as the businesses were slowing down. And that's easier to cut at a Citibank because they don't really have a product like an Office Depot has a product. It's really a financial services business, so you just cut down the servicing of the people that you need to operate whatever products they're offering.
Easier said than done, right?
Absolutely.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. John, Mark, and Dan, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Well, the governors of New Jersey, Vermont, and Wisconsin are going to appear before the House Appropriations